When the young Richard Wells went to work on the launch of the Roanoker Magazine in the fall of 1974, the city and world he operated in was closer in character to 1924 than to 2024. Big black telephones with curly cords sat on wide desks, also equipped with a typewriter, a whiteout strip, and a little collection of well-sharpened number 2 pencils. Gasoline was around 50 cents a gallon, and the average new car cost about $4,400. Fondue was a trend. Bread was 27 cents a loaf. In Roanoke, Elvis Presley played at the new downtown Civic Center, which was just off the interstate spur into Roanoke, completed 10 years earlier. Within a year, Vice Mayor Noel C. Taylor would begin a mayoral term that would last until 1992. Reader's Digest, launched in 1922, was the nation's best-selling magazine. TV Guide, created in 1953, was the second most circulated magazine. In Roanoke, the Morning Roanoke Times and the Evening Roanoke World News landed on tens of thousands of porches every day. Junior high paper boys got up early in the morning on Saturdays and walked around their neighborhoods to knock on doors and collect for the paper. Circulation peaked at 120,000 copies per day. Present-day figures are about a tenth of that. Richard was just 26 years old in 1974, but was already the 3-year publisher of a magazine called Ski South, which capitalized on both his love of skiing and his early life experiences with many aspects of publishing.
I remember going to this one room at the Crystal Towers building. I think it was 442. That's where the Roanoker Magazine launched. When the guy came to put my name on the door, I knew I wanted Ski South there because that was the only thing I've been publishing for a couple of years, but I knew the Roanoker was coming. So he's like, well, we only got so many letters here. And so to spur of the moment, I come up with Leisure. And what was happening around the country in a few cities, it was just beginning to happen, but Richmond Chamber of Commerce was publishing a bi-monthly magazine, I think, Birmingham, Alabama. Those were 2 samples that I had when I went to the Roanoke Chamber in 1974 in the spring and said, I'm going to start a city magazine. I think it could be really good for Roanoke. And he listened politely, he being the executive, Jack Smith, but then very dismissively tossed over a copy of something, I think it was called the Roanoke Picture Story. It came out once every 3 or 4 years, very different than a magazine. He quickly told me that's all that the Chamber of Commerce needed, if he could help in any way to let him know. And I said, well, actually, if you could give me a letter, maybe to introduce me to the community. So I got that letter probably within a week. It was a very short letter. As I recall, it was 1 sentence saying, understand you plan to publish a magazine in Roanoke. Good luck. But I want to say that was a good old boys club back in the 1970s. The world has changed. The Chamber of Commerce leadership is very different today. Thank God.
The alternative was to launch without chamber support. And that is what Richard got to work on. Working very much as a one-man band, he bore down on the content and advertising support toward the launch of a new magazine.
Another person from that early days who was responsible for my back cover, I knew David, had met him through the newspaper, and told him what I was doing and while he was getting started in real estate. And he believed in what I was doing. So he sold the back cover, which is the most significant revenue producer in the publication. He sold it to Don Perry. So for the first few years, Don Perry had the back cover of every issue.
What is now the longest-running city magazine in Virginia, and a magazine commensurate in quality with its peers in Baltimore, Atlanta, Washington, and many other cities, was in many ways born nearly fully formed. The inaugural issue featured a cover image of the First National Exchange Bank building, then under construction at the corner of Jefferson and Campbell. The cover story was written by the magazine's young founder and extolled the explosion of construction downtown and around the valley. and in its forward-looking Roanoke championing content were key elements that remain to this day: profiles of a lawyer, an architect, an interview with a French chef, pieces on how to buy art and how to lure convention business for Roanoke. And what would come to be the mantra for the magazine was alive and well in the very first issue. If it's good for Roanoke, it's good for the Roanoker. While Richard was the driving force behind every aspect of that first issue, content, ad sales, production, printing, and distribution, he quickly put together a team of freelancers, artists, photographers, and within a year, he had lashed together a tiny staff.
I can mention several people who helped out in different ways. Randy King later became the Hokies football writer, and for years I read him. He was turned into a great sports writer. He was my distribution guy. We probably had 100 or 200 subscriptions. We'd just stuff mailboxes with some of those first issues. Dan Smith, who has had a great career in journalism. I had another desk over there. I can remember him sitting, helping compose some of the early letters to the editor that the magazine mysteriously had. My first employee was Venetia Van Nortwick. She was an artist, and so I knew she could help on the layout of the publication. But she also did all kinds of secretarial stuff. The process today is a breeze compared to in 1974. Every line of type that you see on the printed page was cast on a slug and put in a tray, and then they would ink that tray, send you a copy of that galley. You would cut it out and paste it down on a layout page.
The magazine increased in page count in 1975 and saw the arrival of two people who would contribute immensely to its future growth. The magazine's second art director and the publisher's wife, Teresa Black, brought new life to its page designs. In the years to come, Teresa would fill numerous roles, art directing some of the Roanoker's greatest covers and playing a key part in the magazine's 1981-82 Idea House showcase. With the arrival of Norma Luger, the magazine's editorial content would see a new level of excellence and scope. Luger, an award-winning and pioneering journalist from the Roanoke Times, helped solidify and expand two aspects of the magazine that have been staples ever since: her Finest Home series and her conviction that what people want to read about is people took the magazine toward new levels of popularity and readership. Norma Luger would remain a friend, champion, and contributor to the magazine for the rest of her life, including a stint when she and Richard operated Luger Wells Advertising on the side. Her death in 2010 left a hole that has not been filled.
The first big step that the Roanoker took into community-based, heartfelt, human interest stories was brought to us by my first real editor. It was Norma Luger. She brought a certain class to the magazine. She believed every story revolved around people. She won many journalism awards. She wrote in a personal way. She tended to see romance in a lot of stories. For years after she left, so many people would come and tell me how much she had meant to them.
Mid-1976 saw the arrival of another star-to-be in Brenda McDaniel. If Norma set the pattern for excellence in homes and personality coverage, Brenda moved the magazine forward in the realms of hard-hitting investigative journalism and community involvement.
I decided in the 7th grade I wanted to be a writer. So I started out deciding I would write novels, and then I sort of wrote a few pages and decided, maybe better find a job that's like pays money. So I decided on journalism at that time. When I first started there, we were on the 2nd floor of a house on Washington Avenue in Old Southwest. For me coming in, I was still pretty young at the time. I thought this was just the greatest environment. They were actually writing and publishing a magazine there, and they worked on it late at night, and they ate pizza, and there were pizza boxes all over the place. People were very friendly. We were just a real close team, small team, still just trying to get something off the ground.
By 1978, the Roanoker was prodding its hometown with its annual Dubious Achievement Awards, but also about the cost of funerals and a failed war memorial in Elmwood Park. Brenda's 7 years at the editorial helm also saw the arrival of several other staples that would remain for decades. In addition to the Doobies, which appeared annually through 2009, the magazine launched what was originally the Best and Worst of Roanoke, which in the form of the Best of Roanoke presented its 38th edition this year. Brenda put the city and region on notice that the Roanoker was now an active civic voice in the community with her May-June 78 piece, Burn Hewitt's First 100 Days. Hewitt 35 had hit the ground progressively running, and the magazine's report card included strong endorsements on Hewitt's work from such city council stalwarts as Nicholas Taubman, Lucian Grove, and Mayor Noel Taylor. In October 1980, Brenda's cover story, The Struggle at City Hall, asked the question, can this ambitious, forward-thinking manager survive a changing mandate and a more conservative council?
Brenda, we broke the story. I think the headline was, why are we running Piedmont out of Roanoke? And so she exposes this letter that had never been published from Piedmont Airlines to the city, saying, if y'all don't do something about the runway, we're going to quit sending our planes in there because we're getting bigger planes and we need more space. But once people found out about it, we got busy and extended a runway.
2 issues later, Brenda took on the scandal-ridden Roanoke County Board of Supervisors. In her hard-hitting piece, Will the Triumvirate Be Unbroken? Also in 81, Brenda unknowingly planted the seeds of her successor when she accepted for publication a gloriously sophomoric humor column with a title as silly and as long as the column itself. Good things from the valley, advice, guidance, and occasional first aid from the Star City Seer.
I had moved here, 2 or 3 years earlier to Roanoke, and I worked in a completely different field, and I was interested in magazines, always been interested in magazines. And I liked the Roanoker, but I thought it lacked humor. And so I sent a package of projected humor columns to the editor then, Brenda McDaniel. And to my surprise, she said, yeah, we'll run this. And so that's how I got started with the Roanoker. And within a year or 2 or 3, she started to give me assignments, more traditional assignments. And then to my surprise, I think in 83, she said she was going to leave and that I should apply for her job. And I did. And that's how I got here.
Kurt was one of my writers at the Roanoker. When I decided to move on, it was not at all hard to pick a successor because he was right there. He was wonderful. He was dependable. He was a known entity. And I'm just so glad that he accepted the job and has stayed for so long and built the Roanoker. The Roanoker is so much more than it has ever been.
Kurt Reinheimer's first issue as editor was January 1984, which celebrated the opening of Center in the Square. His enthusiasm, combined with Richard's vision and ambition, would open an era of health and expansion, not just for the Roanoker, but for the company as a whole. As Richard wrote in the January-February 24 issue of the Roanoker, in his note on Kurt's 40th anniversary at Leisure, long ago I realized that without Kurt there would be no Leisure. Our claim that the Roanoker is Virginia's oldest city magazine would never have been possible.
Richard is the best boss there ever could be. And for me personally, this is the best job I could ever have. It's a dream come true to work here every day.
In the fall of 1988, Leisure's well-established and award-winning city magazine would gain a sibling in the form of a new publication, Blue Ridge Country. Richard's growing up near Asheville and his boyhood recollections of family outings on the Blue Ridge Parkway spawned the idea for this regional magazine. As Arizona Highways magazine covered that state, and as Yankee magazine covered New England, so Blue Ridge Country came to extol the travel, people, culture, and history of the Southern Appalachians, with the Blue Ridge Parkway serving as its anchoring spine. And as if he didn't have enough to oversee in the late 80s, Richard put on his architecture and home improvement hat which had been donned for the first time with the presentation of the Roanoker's Idea House in 1982. This time, the project was the company's headquarters since 1980, 2 adjoining houses on Brambleton Avenue. Working with architect Jeff Parkhill, Richard planned the joining of the houses into one seamless and architecturally pleasing entity.
We had alleyways or driveways up to get to the back behind both of those residences, and so we just built between them. That was like 1987. The architect, Jeff Parkhill, he won a national award for adaptive reuse for what he had helped us put together here.
At this juncture, Richard began to look beyond the company's walls for ways to impact the community. He founded the Brambleton Avenue Association, and his love of the Parkway manifested itself through his 12 years as president of Friends of the Blue Ridge Parkway.
We started the Brambleton Avenue Merchants or Business Association. We represented those people to DMV, and we tried to make sure that everybody had access, that customers could get to their place of business. And down on the corner of 419 and Brambleton, part of the deal was we got them to fill in that 30-foot hole down there. And we did a planting. To this day, it looks great today. I was on the board of the Convention Visitor Bureau, later served as president of that organization. I was on the Small Business Development Center at the Chamber. Once the Chamber had changed hands, they wanted me to help with other small businesses and advise them. And got a Golden Trowel Award when we bought Marketplace Center in 1989 and developed that last block of the city market that was in disrepair. Very proud of that. The Blue Ridge Parkway Association, in 94 I was invited as a publisher of Blue Ridge Country to come on that board. Susan Mills, the executive director who I hired when I became president in 2002. For the next 12 years, we built that organization from 870 members to almost 10,000 and contributed so much to the Parkway in so many ways, planted thousands of trees, and it was something I'm very proud of.
Much like its publisher, the Roanoker also stayed involved in the community. When the proposed Explorer Park faced an existential crisis based on the opposition of a small group of citizens, along with an obstructing state senator, the Roanoker's cover and hard-hitting story on the matter helped to maintain state funding toward the realization of at least a park and a parkway spur. The fall of 1990 would see a hotly contested vote on whether or not to consolidate Roanoke City and County. Leading with a graphic and unprecedented cover, the magazine devoted much of an issue to advocating for the money-saving merger, including an editorial from the publisher and a piece from the late Chip Woodrum. But the vote failed, with the city voting overwhelmingly yes and the county a resounding no. As the Roanoker and the company continued into the modern era, leisure became a launching point for many accomplished careers, especially for those from the art and production department. People like David Harris, Rob Agee, William Alexander, and others are emblematic of the many whose wonderful work for the Roanoker and other leisure publications sent them into the wider world well prepared for the successes they achieved. It was during this era that the magazine began a major new public service feature that has continued to be published every other year since. 1992's Top Doctors issue was a bestseller, as have been ensuing issues. Each edition in this long-running and exclusive community service presents choices by local nurses of the best doctors in some 50 specialty areas. The rise of Virginia Tech football during the 90s, combined with Richard being a huge fan, led to the first of what would be several Frank Beamer covers in '94. And September '97 marked the permanent move to a perfect bound presentation, bringing the Roanoker into full parity with its big city sisters across the nation. Richard developed a pattern for the magazine of a new big idea every decade. The late 90s were no exception to this trend, with Leisure producing its first piece for Virginia tourism. Virginia Outdoors marked the beginning of what has been a 25-year relationship with the state's tourism agency. 1999's Virginia Travel Guide began Leisure's continuing role as Virginia's official publisher. It was also during this time the two largely behind-the-scenes stars for the Roanoker were beginning their illustrious careers at Leisure. Denise Koff, who retired in 2023, brought a new level of expertise, experience, and insight to the marketing, newsstand sales, and advertising sales of the magazine. Another star soon arrived who did not move on from Leisure to advance her career.
My name is Cherie Renee Carr. I am the Vice President of Leisure Media 360. I came to Leisure in October of 1999, and I started as an accounting clerk. I became the collections manager, and then probably not until 2007, I think I became the HR manager, and from there I went and I became a sales representative. In 2020, I was the associate publisher. And then in 2023, I became the vice president of Leisure. So I started from the bottom and I made it up to the top.
Cherie Carr, a young woman who came to us right out of college 20-some years ago and has acceded from the worst job at this company. We gave her collections. Having to call people on the phone to collect is just about the toughest job in this office. She made friends with the people she collected money from. She is the vice president of this company, and she does not call me for advice very often.
If there's another shining star in Leisure's long pattern of hiring smart, it is someone who outgrew her initial job, manning the front desk, far more quickly than it took the company to promote her.
My name is Liz Long, and I'm the editor of the Roanoker for the last 8 years. I was actually hired in 2012 as the receptionist, and then Richard Wells walked out of a meeting one day and said he didn't quite understand what we were supposed to do with our social media. So I raised my hand and volunteered to help out, and next thing you knew, I was doing all the social media, and it just sort of went from there.
And Liz, in becoming the magazine's 5th editor, brought with her not only the print issue excellence of Richard, Norma, Brenda, and Kurt, but also moved the magazine into realms unknown and unforeseen for her predecessors. The magazine's website came alive with updates and exclusive content. Social media channels including Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram vastly expanded the Roanoker's reach and interaction with readers and advertisers.
We still have many things that you've seen since 1974, from dining and homes to things about businesses and people. The spirit of the magazine hasn't changed a bit in 50 years. Many features that I'm very proud of are, for example, our 40 Under 40, which started in 2020, and it's again, an honor to be able to highlight over 200 young professionals that are making change and really doing incredible things for our community. I am also the editor of Bride Book. It's been around for 11 or 12 years now. That's another really wonderful way to showcase our community, the hardworking vendors, and the really beautiful couples that are part of that. One of the other things that I'm particularly proud of is our podcast. As an editor now, I don't get to write as much, and so this is a wonderful opportunity for me to sit down with people again and really interview them. I'm very excited to continue the legacy of the Roanoker moving forward, and we really appreciate our community supporting us for 50 years and for 50 more.
Roanoke is not the same place it was in 1974. The railroad left and Carilion ascended. Downtown Roanoke evolved from being dark and dangerous to a vibrant home to some 80 restaurants and some 2,700 residents. The valley as a whole got up and went out to play as the proliferation of greenways and trails transformed Mill Mountain and Carvin's Cove, gave life to Explorer Park, Reed Mountain, and Green Hill Park, to name but a few. The Roanoker was along for all of that and much more, advocating for the runway that came to allow bigger jets, extolling the downtown ambitions of Burn Hewitt and others, clamoring for governmental consolidation even as it failed, applauding the Carilion Virginia Tech partnerships, loving on Tech football, serving as the region's primary vehicle for information on the Valley's collection of superb restaurants and much more. In celebrating the best of Roanoke for 50 years and more than 400 editions, each created with meticulous attention to the best writing, photography, paper, reproduction, and presentation for readers and advertising partners, the Roanokers become a shining star of a publishing success story, the American City Magazine. The magazine stands up strongly to its peers in Washington, Baltimore, Atlanta, and other U.S. cities. Much like its host community, the Roanoker continues to proudly punch well above its weight class. And there's another gift that the Roanoker has given to the Valley, rewarding and gainful employment for more than 500 people. Because without the heart and sweat of those people, who sold the ads and wrote the stories, who took the photographs and edited the copy, who worked with the printer, and who delivered each issue, there would have been no Roanoker Magazine, much less one entering its second 50 years.
In starting this publication, and to have connected with the people that have come into my life, the most important of which is the 40 years that I've got to spend with Kurt Roanoke. And one of the things I'm most proud about is that we have a number of people that have been here for 20 years or more, or 25 years. That says something good about the culture. It is not that anybody has ever been put those golden handcuffs on and you just pay them too much that they can't leave. Nobody ends up working here to get rich, including the publisher. I've been so blessed all along the way, certainly with the early experience, but also in having the right people cross my paths and decide to throw their future and their lives in with this small company. I'd like to say that I feel like a blessed man.